Can you tell me about life on the farm?
The farm. Well, starting off the farm in Preston there, yes, we did a lot of work on that farm, and we used to get pigs. I used to have sows, and I rebuilt the barn and whitewashed everything and made stalls, everything whitewashed. And I had sick pigs. I remember that, and it was even a time I had some purebred pigs, and they were inbred pigs. And as soon as they had little pigs, they ate the little pigs. And my neighbor, Richard Sheedle, they were Mennonites, very nice. I called them, and he went in the stall, and I said to him, better get out the old sow. And the old sow just about bit him. And then I called the vet, and the vet came. And when he walked into that barn, he says, man, I never seen a barn like that. All whitewashed, and very clean. And I said to him, doctor, how come I got sick pigs? That's why I got sick pigs. A pig is a pig. Now, it is good to keep stall clean, but if you keep it too clean, they get inbred, and they get all kinds of diseases, and let them out. As soon as I let them out into the corral, they got into the dirt and all that, but did not too bad, we and then somehow I got a contractor to make cucumbers. And it was quite a fun cucumber business. We made some money, and I hired all my nephews, and they still remember today. And then I made from a Volkswagen a cucumber picker. Actually, the Volkswagen did not pick the cucumber, but people lay on their stomach, and this Volkswagen motor geared that very slow down, and they went right over, and as they were, they had baskets, and they used to pick the cucumbers and put them in the basket, and I used to pick them up, but it was not too bad, and then it came, that I sold the farm and come to Hamilton. And here in Hamilton, we lived in the city for a while, where we had a nursing home, but I still wanted to farm. And then I bought a farm here, where right now the landfill side is on it, And again here we did a lot of work, Betty Tant and I remember a time on a Saturday that we worked, we looked at the clock, and I said, we better quit this Sunday. But farming was all right, I'm just thinking on it as an old story was a guy win $1 million, he kept farming till he spent it. Yeah. And right now, even farming is a very big industry, costs a lot of money. Machinery and equipment and fertilizers and all that, that's all the farming.
How about the farm in Yugoslavia?
In Yugoslavia, the farmer, my dad, we had once figured it out with my cousin's husband, the doctor, when he was here. My dad had about close to 800 acres of land, And the land there was all one piece of land. There was no bush even no fence lines, from the neighbor. The farm there, I remember as kids when they used to plow the neighbor, and then there was a stone, a big marking stone, where the land started. I remember holding a white flag, and the hired man or my brother used to plow with one shear plow, the first plow, not going over to the neighbor. And the thing was this, that the weeds at home, they had no chance to grow. There were weeds. There were weeds in the corn and in the wheat, thistles in the wheat and all that, but not too much. They didn't need it. There was no spray. There was no spray, and there was no fertilizer, chemical fertilizer, and all that. It was all natural way. It was rotated the land. And the Bible says that the land should be left to rest. And that has a very important part. And I said this many times as we started about the Bible. It is good for people to read the Bible for their soul salvation. But if they don't want to read it for a soul salvation, read it for an instruction book. But today, people figure that they are smart. They don't need that. They don't need no advice. They have all this, I call it button-pushing generation. And I don't know how do we land up. I mean, I'm not concerned about myself. I'm more concerned of my grandchildren and great-grandchildren and those who come yet. That what if this keeps going, to me, this will all of a sudden come to nothing. That's what my opinion is, and I don't know. But the farming at home, they was a very prosperous, should say, industry, and we grew a lot of hemp, what is today called marijuana, but see, people have to realize that marijuana and hemp was grown in two ways. If it was grown for seed, then we planted it with a corn planter, a foot apart. And if we grew it for linen, to work and make linen out of it, then it was planted like a wheat, very thick, but needed very strong land. There was put a lot of manure on it and rested land. And I remember we had some parts of the land, a little bit better land than the other, and I knew about where it was. The better land, that's where they used to put the hemp. And when this hemp was ready to be harvested, let's call first the seed. I remember it very well that they went early in the morning out when the dew was, when it was a little bit moisture, and they had a hatchet, and the stump was quite big, and they used to go and grew just about like a tree, a lot of leaves, a lot of seed on it, That's what today they grow the marijuana, because they use that seed stuff and what as I see it, And then they brought that in on a wagon, and on the wagon used to be a tarp, because they threw it on a wagon, that the seed fell into that tarp. And then I remember a place where they then spread the tarp, and they put that there, and when the sun was shining on it, then they had a stick with a piece of chain on it, and used to hit it, and all the seed used to fall out, and the leaves, what is today the pot, they threw it on a manure pile. But the hand what was used for linen had to be soaked into water. We used to have a pond, and they used to put that all, piled it on, and put bricks on top of it to sink it, and quite a work, I remember we used to pile the bricks on it, but all the fish and frogs and anything what lived in the pond died. Then was another thing, my mom used to have a lot of geese for feathers. And then the geese was butchered for meat, but the main thing was for feathers. And the geese, whenever they went into the pond, the first thing they were drinking. And if they got into the pond where this hand was soaked, they got drunk, they got dopey. And I remember my mom always said, watch the geese not to go into the pond. And I recall it, if I closed my eyes, I could see it. The geese come out and tumble all over the place, Well, we never, anybody ever taught on to smoke. As kids, I remember we tried maybe to smoke the hair from the corn thing there, but never did the thing there. And then was, they had big stocks of this hennef, and they used to ship it, and then my brother, my oldest brother, and my cousin, they got the idea that instead of shipping it to a hand factory, they will do it by their own. And so they had, I remember, then the Nazis came in, and the war started a little bit, but they ordered machinery from Germany because my cousin had a steam engine, and they figured that a steam engine will drive these machines and will prove this. And as far as I remember to heard, these machines sort of got lost on the train in the wartime. They I don't know what happened to them. They never did, anything. And but it was a Hanf was a good, profitable, money-making thing there. People worked hard, and a lot of people worked on the farm of my dad. Like cutting the Hanf, I remember that was again hired by the scoop. They used to make a scoop and get paid by that. Good. They got good paid, It was hard work. They made little bundles, not too big of bundles, and hauled it in and piled it, and people were in a morning, like you talking about my dad's farm. In the morning at 6 o'clock, my dad did not tolerate to go and look for this and look for that. At 6 o'clock, they had to be out in the field and work the field. Everything had his place. I remember when we kids used to, even today I say to my children and grandchildren, well, I'm looking for this, and wherever you put it, that's what my dad used to say, wherever you put it, that's where you will find it. And to me, it made much sense, because everything had his chains, and all kinds of other tools, And my dad used to hire a lot of people by day's work. A day's wages were at that time like 6 dinar, but you could buy a lot of things for 6 dinar, or a dinar was quite a bit, when saving. I'm coming in, maybe not, that's not in the farming included. I did some for my brother-in-law, deliver some teeth, because he was a dentist, and and he used to give me a quarter. And wherever I took it to his cousin, he gave me a quarter. And I used to save it. But I like candies. I have a train station, they had candy machines. You put a 10 cents in it, and some candy come out and all that. And I said to my brother-in-law, here is my money, you save it for me. Don't give it to me, doesn't matter how much I beg for it. And he did. And one time I want the money. No, he said, no, I'm not giving you. And then he came and said, I spent your money. Because he needed for something, some money. But he gave it to me back. But people in the olden days, even on the farm, people don't needed not much money. If I think on it, the money they needed there is buying salt and sugar and kerosene oil, because even in town there was no hydro. We had no hydro. We had kerosene lamps and carbide lamps, And I remember that on a farm, there was a place, sort of we called it the steps, but it was not walking steps. It was where they went down in the basement. There was the oil lamps. And we had a girl working for us. She used to clean all the glass to be nice and clean. And my dad had a little can, and he used to put before the sun went down, in every lamp oil in it, that when it got dark, they put but people in town and by my dad, I remember my brothers, that we went to bed when the sun was up. I remember that. But we got up with the sun. I used to love to get up early, But people worked, People, work was how should I say, even my dad had some hired people, 2 apartments with hired men, and they were hired by year with everything. They had kerosene oil, they had so much meat, they had so much wheat, they had so much corn, and they had their own apartment. They didn't need, and they had a garden, and they had a yard, and they had fed pigs, and butchered pigs, and I remember them, they come to my dad and they needed salt, and my dad said, don't come without your book. Because my dad had a book, and a hired man had a book, and if I give them 2 kilos salt, they give them either a kilo salt or a kilo sugar, they mark it. And there was so much sugar a year, or so much kerosene oil, and it was there we had about, I would say, 8 to 10 milking cows. And the hired man's wife will help my sisters there to milk the cows. And they used to get the milk. I couldn't tell you, but I remember they used to come with a can, and get their milk. So they had the milk, they had everything, people like to be specially hired by my dad. When they knew rumors went out in town, there was no telephone or anything, but rumors went out in town that my dad looks for a hired man. And then he picked people,
Can you tell me more about life on the farm?
On the farm, just remember there, on Saturdays, and this was again agreed with the hired man's wife, that on a Saturday to clean up the yard and name it. And I think, if I recall right, once a year, I think around in May or so, springtime, spring cleaning, It was a big thing, whitewashing everything, but to come back just on a Sunday, on a Saturday. On a Saturday afternoon, as far as I remember, except it was something very important to do in the field. Otherwise, they just worked in the yard, cleaned everything up, and sweep the yard and so forth. And on a Sunday morning, I remember the hired man knew already what time. They used to put two horses in a buggy. We had a buggy because the farm what bought my dad and his brother-in-law, this Duke had a nice buggy, and my dad had that, and the hired man used to bring that buggy, and as I'm just trying to count, there were about 6 people and a little bench for kids, and sometimes we hanged up in the back, but we went to church. We traveled with the buggy, I would estimate maybe an hour. Where the church was, there was an elder there, and in his yard, in his barn was already a place for to put the 2 horses in, and went to church. And sometimes we stayed there by people invited for lunch, and I think I would estimate about 2 o'clock afternoon church started, and then after church we went with a buggy home. And then evenings, I don't recall that the people used to come singing to my dad's place, because my dad loved music and singing, and my dad bought an organ, and we still have that organ. Somehow we brought that organ here to Canada, and I still got the organ, and people used to come, and my sister Anush, who married the Zimmermans, and my sister-in-law, my second oldest brother, Andrew's wife, Herminatan, she knew how to play the organ. And like I said, the house where I was born, the main house was a big house. The bedrooms, like they say here, you could turn a team of horses around, And I remember, and the bedroom for my dad and mom, there was the organ, and right beside it was a guest room, and had double doors in it, because like I said, the house belonged to a duke. And I remember we had so many guests to singing that they unhooked the doors so that the people don't stand behind the doors when they opened it, because they stood in the other room and were singing. So they liked, people used to love to come and sing, In the olden days, there were more going visiting than today, and I don't know why.
When did you guys first kind of get the feeling that there was a war going on? Because you said you didn't really have telephones or radios.
No, but rumors went on. When the Nazis were in, it was, how should I say, not good. Just like I said once before, talked about that the Germans could buy anything, and Serbians, the Hungarian, Romanians, not so bad, but it caused a big friction. And then when the war was going on, they just thought they will gain the whole world. That's what they were singing. They had a song, I remember, that they will have the whole world, My dad did not follow that. My dad my dad always said when they used to say, like Heil Hitler, you will, Heil means crying, and Heil means holy. And my dad did not like that. I didn't, I mean, we were kids, we were kids. There were soldiers, and just to come to talk about the war, not far, I would say maybe 15 kilometers, and crossing a river, there was a huge pasture field. I mean, very big. We used to drive with a buggy through there when we went to the train. And the Germans made an airport out of that, because that pasture field never been plowed for years and years. The town used to take the cows out there and everything, but they made an airport out of it. And there was a lot of planes there. We could see them flying around. And these pilots, sometimes they came to the farm, and they were pilots, soldiers, and sometimes they even had a meal there, and Jessica's talking of the pilots and talking of the planes. As I said before, my brother bought us a donkey, and made a wagon, and my dad used to say, go get the donkey and go out in the clover field and cut some clover. Pigs used to like some green clover, and get some clover and give it to the pigs, And my brothers and we went out with a donkey, and we cut some clover, and put it on the wagon, and the donkey wouldn't go. Donkey was just like they say, like a mule, but he was a donkey. He got stubborn and would not go. And if we beat him, if we hit him, and we pull him, he just didn't go. And these pilots there, they used to fly around with these planes, with these fast planes. If you ever heard of Messerschmitt, there was a one engine, and I think 2 people could be set in it, very fast, was not a jet, but a propeller. And they used to fly around, they used to fly, and these pilots must have seen us in the field out there getting this donkey going, I never forget that, and all of a sudden this plane, came right down very low and just zimmed right over us. I don't want to say how, very close. And that donkey took off. That donkey took off. I remember we lost the wagon on wheels and everything there, and finally we picked everything up. And Sunday come along. I think on Sunday, most of these pilots, they came and they apologized. They said they were flying and they saw us try to get the donkey going, and they thought they scared them, but they realized that the donkey just took off. But this airport there was how should I say? They closed our road, They closed our road. We had to go all the way around, when we went to the train station. And I remember one time I went to the train station to pick somebody up, and they didn't come. And some of the pilots came with the train. And they knew me, Oh, here says, will you take us to the base there where the airport was? Well, I said, no, I can't go through there. No, you can. There were some officers, and so they were sitting in the back of the buggy, and I was driving, and the alarm went off. Attack, I remember it. We came to the base. There were wooden barracks, and there were some, by the wooden barracks was some manholes. you know. And these pilots said right away, let the horses go. And I unharnessed the horses, and the horses got away from the buggy, and you go into that hole. And I remember when I went into that hole, and there was some of these Messerschmitt planes. And as the attack went on, these pilots jumped on the plane, and he didn't even close the hood yet. They closed the hood, and that plane just yelled up, and they were fighting in the air. And I remember going, ducking down in that hole, you know, and watching these planes. And I recall, in a way, they shot, I think it was an American plane, down. And there was standing a big man, a black man, a pilot, and the plane was crashed down. You couldn't find not even the engine or anything. So everything fell apart. But the man was standing there and had some overalls on, you know, like these pilots were, and we kids, and a black man, that was another thing for us, a big thing to see, you know. And the army came, you know, and captured them, and we wondered, you know, that how did this guy stayed alive for not even a scratch or anything, you know. But that time we did not know about this injecting, you know. He injected out. But this was going on. They used to have piles of 45-gallon drums with fuel. I mean, just like our workshop is or our house here is. And they piled these barrels, you know, and they used to cover them so that the enemy can see it. And I recall one day, I think the British and the Americans that got on this airport and destroyed every plane. One Messerschmitt stayed because the pilot going to a farm there, instead of walking, he drove that plane on the ground. You know, he could go on the ground with just, I don't know how they do it. He went there shaving himself something here, and that plane was not destroyed. But the other ones, they were, I would say, hundreds of them. And they were all destroyed. They were all burned, and there were planes there like mechanics, you know, sharp as a mechanic. These huge. They had 5 wheels on one side and 5 on the other, and open on the front. I remember one time an army tank and some soldiers on, I don't know, motorcycle went in there, you know, and this thing flew up, and they were all destroyed there. I remember another thing, a lot of people got killed because they went there, and the army went away and found bullets. And there was a sort of not a habit, but people, as soon as they found bullets from a gun, they wiggle the bullet, and you can loosen it up and pour the powder out. Because the hunters who had shotguns, they used to buy that and they used that. And when you got those bullets from a plane, they were exploding bullets. They were, if they hit the plane, as soon as they hit the plane, they explode. And a lot of people did not know that. And they got these bullets, and they were bigger. And as soon as they wiggled around on there, that thing exploded, and people lost their hand. And my dad forbid us very strict not to go on the airport. But there was some people I know, they came, you know, to the relatives, and they got a machine gun, but that was burned. That was no good at all. But then, you know, the war went on, and all of a sudden, you know, time came that the the Russians are already in Romania. See, and then from Romania, there was not long after they said the Russians are getting into to Yugoslavia, and the only problem was with the Russians that they raped women and drinking whiskey. I remember a Russian came in our house there, with a buggy, and they got into the stock room there, and there was a little barrel with vinegar. And he grabbed that barrel right up there and was drinking the vinegar. Yes, they were very alcoholic people. But they had a time, there was a time that there was even in the whole United States and Canada, and everybody had that time, but some of them lifted that. 24 hours a soldier could do anything he wanted. But after 24 hours, there was a law. I remember that they went in town, tried to rape a woman, and 24 hours were over, that a Russian officer shot the soldier right in the bedroom. Yes, and that, that was, but then the Serbians there, where the Germans sort of mishandled the people. They were people of revenge. There were people coming, my uncle, my so-and-so, been shot by the Nazis. I want 100 Germans, and they counted 100 Germans out and shot them. I just about got into there and said, no, not you, the guy behind you. And I'll tell you, and you shake. I remember, you shake. You start to realize when you see bodies all over the place. But then things went, there's all, those who did all these terrible things, they caught some of them, and I don't know what happened, But the thing was this, again, I have to repeat and even come to that. God was always there. God, they people come, and demanded of things, and they demanded that we have a gun, and we didn't have a gun. We had no guns. I mean, there was, all kinds of things, and again, God was involved. They went to look, and they found out that by some other vineyard there was some guns, and they were good people and very brutal people. And this is always we find, But we have to put our trust into the living God, and God will do everything right. God never made any mistake, but when he made mankind, that's what the Bible says, he regretted it.